the wheel should go through there nice and easily and slip into this fork here. Now what we've got to do is make sure that we pull this shaft right up to the end of the slot. So we'll pull that right up to the end of the slot. We'll put the tab washer so that its tab drops into that hole. We'll put the round washer on top of it, and then we'll tighten this up finger tight and do the same on this side. So we'll make sure that we pull this shaft right up to the top of this slot. We'll put the tab down into the hole. We'll put the plain washer on top of it, and then we'll wind the nut on finger tight. And finally what we'll do, we'll just tighten the nut up properly, really snug, and this one really snug. And again, we'll now stand it upright and we'll just check with a finger in the top of the fork here and this side as well that they look approximately, this wheel looks approximately in the centre, because we don't want this wheel laying over one way or the other. Before we fix the handlebars on, I'm going to just stand this up on its stand. Right, to fix the handlebars on, make sure that you get your two cables crossed over and this shaft poking through the middle of those two cables to start with. Take this cap off the end and then gently feed this into the main shaft, making sure that your two cables are out the front here and not wrapped around the back of there. Now this will obviously allow you to adjust the height of this to whatever size child that you're dealing with. There's just a piece of Velcro here on this safety cover. Just unclip the Velcro and drop it back, and I'm going to turn the scooter around so that you can see what's happening at the back here. I'm holding the wheel in line with the scooter with my feet. I'm going to set the height of this approximately. Then we're going to tighten up this silver bolt that's on the top here. And after a few turns, or parts of a turn, it will start to stay there on its own as it bites. But now what I'm going to do is to make sure that, let's check, first of all the wheel needs to be in line with the scooter. And secondly, we need to make sure that the handlebar is nicely sitting across the scooter. And at that point we can carry on winding this bolt up until it's completely tight. We need to put quite a lot of load on it, and then we can wobble it around and make sure that it doesn't move, because the last thing you want is the handlebars to move when somebody's riding it. Now these brake levers are purposely loose in the box for packing purposes, but we need a 5mm key on here now. Put the handles into approximately the right place, and then just put a couple of 3 turns on there and it will lock them. And it will lock them in place. Right, now we're going to sort out this front brake block, because we took it off to put the wheel in. Make sure that we have got all the pieces for this front brake block. Here we need the brake block. There is a thin washer as opposed to a thick one. And then we put the spherical seating mate on top of it, and then we'll thread this through the caliper. Like that. Okay, so now it's through this side here, and then we'll put the thick spherical seating in, then we'll put the spherical washer in, then we'll put the plain washer on, and when you look at this nut you'll see that one end has got a key shape in it, a hexagon key shape, and the other one is threaded right to the end. That's the end that you need to put onto the brake block. So this is very badly adjusted now. We could have adjusted at the top, but I don't want to take any of the adjustment out at the top because that'll take place at a later date as the brake blocks wear. So we need to make a general adjustment at the bottom here. These calipers are set far too wide apart. Using the 5mm key, we're going to loosen that key and pull these calipers together slightly. Now I don't know how far they need to come together at the moment, but we'll pull them together about there, and then we'll go and have a check on the position of these brake blocks. Okay, now what I'm going to do, this brake block here is only in finger tight at the moment. I'm trying to set the brake block so that when it touches the wheel, it sits about 1mm or 2mm clear of the tyre. In other words, we shall see approximately 2mm of the silver rim at the ends of the brake block, and we don't want the brake block to touch the tyre and rub on the tyre. Okay, so we can push the brake block onto there, and we can see that we've got a nice piece of metal at either end. So we can lock up the brake block in that position. Now we'll check the other brake block on the other side, and we find that this brake block is not in the right position either. So we'll set this brake block down, and we'll push that caliper so that it sits on the surface of the wheel. And we'll adjust the brake block until it's got about 1mm clearance or 2mm clearance at each end. And then we'll tighten it up with it locked onto the wheel. Okay, now we'll let it go. Now the problem that we've got is we need about no more than 2mm clearance between both of the brake blocks. So let's go back to looking at the brake blocks again from this direction. So we're back to our 5mm key. Made sure that this sleeve in here is fully through this bracket and is sitting against the shoulder. I've now pulled all the slack out of the calipers, and I'm now taking all the slack out of this Bowden cable that's running through the middle here, and I'm going to put a small amount of tension on the cable with this clamp. Okay, now at the moment the brake pads are locked solid on the wheel, but now I'm going to go to the front brake and I'm going to apply the front brake and draw back some of the cable, hopefully past this clamp, and I might need to just loosen the clamp so that I can pull some cable back. Just a little bit, let it go and see what slack we've got. And sure enough, look, we've got probably about 2 or 3mm of movement there, which is good, that's perfect. So that means we've got the brake blocks set up as tight as we can get them without actually rubbing on the wheel. There's clearance there. The front wheel runs quite nicely, but I do believe that it's dragging on this brake block here. This system is not quite balanced, and to get it to balance, what we have to do is the brake block that's touching, we've got to draw away. So if it's this brake block that's touching, we've got to wind in this screw here. So we use a Phillips number 2 screwdriver, and we can screw this in a few turns. And now it's gone the other way. This is the brake that's pushing across, can you see that? So we can undo this a little bit. Until they don't set one way or the other. That means these brakes are nicely floating in the middle and they won't specifically drag on one side or the other. And that's perfect. Now, bearing in mind that there was a problem here on the front wheel, although it's been set in the factory, I think we'll go and check what the status of the back wheel is. Well, here we are on the back brake, and as you can see we've got quite a large amount of movement here, more than I would expect to find. We've probably got about 4 or 5mm of clearance there, and I would like to see that down to around about 2 or 3. So we need to do the same thing on the back wheel. We need to slacken the screw, tighten the calipers up so that we've got no clearance. There we go, no clearance. Pull all the slack cable out and then tighten it up slightly. Okay, so now we've got rid of all the clearance in there completely. And now what I'll do is to pull the back brake cable and allow a little bit to slide through. Just loosen, keep pulling the cable at the handlebars. As you can see, I'm putting some pressure on there. And then we'll just loosen this very slightly until we see a little bit of cable drawing back. There we go. That looks pretty good in terms of the amount of clearance that I'm expecting. So we'll lock that up. And now what we have to do is to balance the brakes at the back here so that neither one is rubbing particularly. They're not badly balanced actually. Certainly not a large amount of drag on there. And surprisingly, that back wheel bearing doesn't feel lumpy. Well, despite all the little problems that we had, the second one went together probably in about half an hour, about the same as the first one. My comments after doing the Mauve one were solidly built, it's well made, nothing's going to fall apart. Some of the assembly work that had been done in the factory left a little bit to be desired, but it was completely fixable here on site as we assembled it. It's excellent value for money, and the black one, 5 stars, the Mauve one, 5 stars.